Today's lesson is how to create a herringbone pattern. This pattern is usually commonly used in woven fabrications, fabrics that do not stretch, that is a woven. And you commonly find this pattern in dress suitings, like full piece suits, as well as dress pants, anything that's tailored, any items that are tailored. Also, you find it in accessories. These are two examples of herringbone patterns. And when you can see, one is a larger scale version up at the top and one's a much smaller scale. So I'm going to zoom in on here so you can see the smaller scale version. So you can see the distinct look about a herringbone. It actually resembles a broken zigzag pattern, almost like a chevron. So you can see that it's a series of just V shapes that connect across the fabric. Like I said, this is a much larger scale version and here's a small scale version, but either way they are still considered herringbone patterns. So today we're going to create one in Illustrator so you can give more dimension to some of your pattern work. If you were ever using these fabrications, you can use them as a visual reference for the scale of your herringbone like I have here, and decide whether you want to make a larger scale or a smaller scale. But you can also use, once you create a herringbone pattern such as this, you can then make it smaller by scaling with the black arrow. So you only have to create one version of it and then scale accordingly. So in order to create this pattern, it's really important that it follows, if the V shapes that you see here, that they connect, and also that they are perfectly aligned going across, and that also the visual that you create is a stacked formation of these two V's look like they're stacked directly on top of each other, and they're also left to right perfectly aligned. So that's the look we want to achieve, and because it's a very exact type of look where everything is evenly spaced and perfectly aligned, I create what I call a grid. So you can see my grid up here, and this is a tool that I create, and I use it as a temporary tool. I delete it off later, but I use it as a tool so that I can get a perfect alignment where the points all meet vertically down the center, and then also aligns at the sides. So you can see that the one that follows the grid is going to be much more of a successful herringbone shape at the end that has much more symmetry across and is just an overall better look. So to create this grid, first I'm going to take my pen tool, and I'm going to hold shift and just create one perfectly straight line. Then I'm just going to copy and paste that same straight line, vertical line, and I'm just going to pull it over a little bit of space away, enough spacing where I can fit a couple lines in between. I'm going to use my align tool, which is Window, Align, and here's the toolbox that pops up. I'm going to use my align tool to make sure that my two vertical lines that I just drew are perfectly aligned at the top. So because I copied and pasted one to get the other, now I know that both of my lines are the same height, which is perfect. But right now I just want to make sure that they're aligned at the top. So for instance, if I had drawn that one there, I want to click on both and use this vertical align top button. And now it brings them so that they're flush at the top. And like I said, they're also the same height, which is what you want. And that's why we copy one stripe to get our second stripe. Then I'm going to go to Object Blend Options. And I'll tell you why I go here in a second. But basically, normally this option, Blend Options, defaults to smooth color every single time. So when you see that, just click on it, go down to specified steps. So you have to click to find that every time. Now I'm going to ask for the specified steps to be 3. And I'll just show you what happened, and then I'll go back and tell you why I did this. Then I have to go back to Object Blend again and hit the word Make. So see what happened? It actually added 3 additional straight vertical lines in between these two bookends. So I'll go back and then I'm gonna, in order to release that, anytime you use the blend tool, you just go Object, Blend, Release. Okay. So that gets rid of what I just did. So I'm going to just show you again. I did two perfectly straight lines that one I drew, one I copied, and then I used the vertical align top tool to make sure they were flush at the top. Now, think of these two vertical lines as bookends on a bookshelf. So basically the blend tool is going to use, when I use the blend tool and I ask for specified steps to be in between, like for instance, I picked the number 3 of specified steps to be in between those two vertical lines. It's because the blend tool, I'm telling the blend tool that I want 3 additional stripes to appear between these two bookend stripes. And that's what the specified steps is. It's just the number of things that you want to copy within these two bookends. It's only going to copy what you highlight. So it's only copying these stripes exactly, but it's going to give you 3 more in the middle. So any number you put, go to Object, Blend right now, Blend Options. And again, remember, you go to Specified Steps. So any number I put in here, and I go Object, Blend, Make to actually create it. Now I have 5 because I typed in the number 5. So it gave me 5 stripes in the middle. Object, Blend, Release to get rid of that because I actually just need 3 stripes to create this herringbone grid. Object, Blend, Blend Options, Specified Steps. You only need 3 for this exercise. Click OK. I wish that the blend tool automatically put those 3 stripes in the middle, but it doesn't. So you always have to go back one more time and hit the word Blend Make. So blend options, you're just telling it how many steps you want. Then you have to go back one more time and say blend make to actually make those steps happen. And each one of these stripes is considered the steps. So now that I have my grid started from the vertical side, I'm just going to copy and paste that same exact grid with the black arrow and then Control C, Control V to copy paste. And now I'm going to just hold Shift, take the black arrow and rotate the vertical grid to get a horizontal version of that. But I'm basically using the first starting point that I did, which was the vertical stripe grid, to rotate and give me my horizontal version of the grid. So now I have my grid. And sometimes, depending on the size of the herringbone that I want to create, I might choose to keep it this big, or I can also take the black arrow, hover over the whole entire thing, hold Shift, and scale the grid. So if anytime you want to do a smaller herringbone to start, you can also just scale the grid to begin with, or you can just create a bigger herringbone like I've done here and scale it later on this way. Either way works, but for right now, I think I'm going to actually use this smaller, scale the grid to begin with. So this is when I lock the grid, because I don't object lock selection. The reason why I lock the grid is because I'm using it as a template to draw over top of. So anytime I'm drawing over top of something, I don't want to accidentally with the pen tool pull at any of these lines that are in the grid, because what I just want to do is draw my herringbone over top. So I lock it so that it just appears flat, and then I don't accidentally pull at any points that are in these horizontal or vertical lines. So now I'm going to start to draw my herringbone. So basically I take the pen tool. I might play with a weight that's a little thicker, maybe 3 points to start. I want the line to appear thicker, the stroke line I use to appear thicker than the actual grid lines that are in the grid. So I'm going to click at one point of the intersection, and literally I'm just going into point to point of the grid to create a chevron shape, or like a zigzag shape. So you can see that I started this intersection point, I went down to this, went up here, down, up. So literally all you want is just 2 letter V's that are connected. That's all you need to create this pattern. So don't do an additional half of a V off to the side. Don't do that. delete that. All I need is just 2 V's like that to start this pattern. So I'm actually going to make sure that these points, see the points here are kind of overlapping down at the bottom. Zoom in so you can see. I need to bring this up so that those points are flush with the top of the grid. So I'm just pulling down with the black arrow, and I actually have to raise this up at the side here. It's only because the stroke weight that I used was a little thick, so it actually started to overlap the grid points at this. You want to make sure you're confined within the boundaries of these 2 lines here. So this horizontal and this horizontal line, you want to make sure your V shape is confined at the top and bottom so it doesn't overlap down here. Okay, so once we have our little zigzag look, then I just click on the one that I created and I hit copy. And then I line it up again down on the second tier of the grid. So I'm going to line it up as best as I can. We can use the align tool later to make sure it's all aligned with each other. But I'm going to just line it up so that it meets at the same third tier of the grid. So I'm just literally going down the grid. I'm going to go down 4 tiers. So I'm going to have 4 of these zigzag looks. And then I'm going to click on each one of them. Like I said, even if you accidentally didn't align them all perfectly along each plane, I'll make ones purposely that you can see. I'll make purposely so you can see that these weren't perfectly aligned to begin with, so that I can easily fix that with the align tool. So I'm going to click on all 4 of them, holding shift to select all 4. I'm going to go to my align tool again and just hit horizontal align left, which is underneath the word align objects. And basically all that did was just make sure that they were flush on the same side. And again, because I always copy from the original first drawing that I did, which was this one, I copied that to make the next 3 tiers of the zigzag. Now, not only when I align all 4 together to make sure they're flush at the left-hand side, they also are the same width across because I copied it. And also the intersection points are now vertically stacked at the center here. At all the center points going down vertically, everything is now perfectly aligned because I copied from the original. I don't freehand draw all the rest. What I would do is just copy all 4 of them. You can object group them so they're all together. And then I would just copy and paste those 4 and then drag them down to be directly into the center of the previous 4. So now I have another set of 4 zigzags that I'm actually going to just align right in the center between the previous 4 that I drew on the grid. And now I got a much tighter kind of herringbone where the spacing is a lot tighter in between, which is pretty accurate to most woven herringbone fabrics you'll find in the market. So now that I have that, again, I just want to click on, because I grouped my 4 zigzag patterns already, and now since I copied them, this series of 4 is also grouped. When I bring it over to the grid, now I can click on both sets of 4, and now because they're grouped, it's selected everything at once. And I'm going to, again, one more time, just use my horizontal left tool in the align box, just to make sure that when I added that next series of 4, that now everything is flush with the existing 4 zigzags that I drew previously. So now that everything's aligned and now I have all my chevrons grouped, I can pull it off the artboard, pull it off the grid, and I can do Object, Pattern, Make. Hit OK. Now I'm in the pattern window. And this is really important. I want you to notice what happened. So basically, I need to do some fixing in this window in order for it to make a more accurate herringbone look. You can see right here, this is within this boundary box, the blue line box is my original pattern. So when I put it in a repeat, there's a big white space happening in here between the top and bottom of that boundary box. So I need to fix that. I need to use the pattern tile tool, which is right here under pattern options. I need to click on that, and now all you'll see in the blue box is within the blue boxes there's these little points that I can actually pull down on from the top. You only need to pull from one side, and you'll start to notice that the pattern is coming together closer and closer on the top and bottom. So I just pull down until the spacing all the way top and bottom looks pretty accurate. So I'm talking about the white space in between the black lines. Once that looks like it's actually the same spacing throughout, then what I also want to do to correct this look in the pattern window is I also see how the sides left to right aren't connected. So what you want is a continuous connection, just like you see here where it continually connects. So I'm going to again keep the pattern tile tool on, and now I'm just going to pull from the left and right side. Sorry, from one of the sides, either left or right. Just pull from one, and you can start to see that I'm coming together closer, and I'm overlapping. Now they look like they're overlapping and they're touching. That's the look you want. You do not want the space in between like we had originally. You want to just pull at the side. And I zoom in to do this because sometimes if you're zoomed out too far, you can't really see how the overlap is happening, because what you don't want to happen, and I'll zoom in even more, is if I pull at it and then it starts to overlap it where you get this extension that hangs off. You don't want that either. So it's good to zoom in for this part just to make sure that it's kissing right here. And that's what you want. You want this look that looks like the two zigzags are kissing at the sides. So I zoom in to do that, to make sure that that's what that looks like. Then I zoom out one more time, make sure my spacing in between vertically is correct, as well as the kissing at the left and right hand side is correct before I hit the word done. So now that I hit the word done in the pattern window, under the swatch box you will automatically see, and I have a bunch in here, but the last swatch will be the herringbone pattern you just created. So now I'm going to create let's move these off to the side for a second. Anytime we do a fabric swatch, we use the rectangle tool and we create a square that will then be filled with our pattern. So I'm going to then click on that square and then click on the swatch box that I actually just created with the herringbone. And one thing that's important is you want to always make sure that your fill box over here is the one that's filled with the pattern. Your stroke box on a fabric swatch should always be empty. So there should always be a no fill color in your stroke box with the red line cut through. Anytime you do a fabric swatch, you do not want a color in the stroke box. So here's my herringbone pattern that I just created. So you can see that everything appears same as this fabric over here. Here's the actual woven fabric, and you can see that there's a similar look of the stacked kind of zigzag pattern stacked on top of each other, as well as the intersections that meet perfectly at the sides. So everything is just perfectly kissing at the sides left and right, as well as that stacked look. And then the spacing in between is very similar as well between the black and the white stripe. Black and white zigzag. So basically that creates anytime we do these textured patterns, what happens is it creates an overlay. So I like to think of it as an overlay as a piece of tracing paper that you put over top. You drew something on a piece of tracing paper and you put it over top of an existing drawing. Now you can still see the existing drawing coming through the tracing paper. However, the tracing paper lays on top and creates yet a second layer of dimension to your existing drawing. So think of it the same way. It's pretty much a textured overlay. So pretty much I then create a fabric swatch that would look similar to this. I would just create the same exact shapes rectangle and fill it with a color very similar. So I chose like a soft gray that kind of resembles the color in here because it's not really a true white. And then I took my pattern herringbone swatch that's as an overlay, and I just stacked it on top, and I made sure the rectangles were the same exact shape so that it fits perfectly over top. So pretty much anytime you do these fabric swatches, just think of them as two different layers where one is sitting on top. So there it is. That's my herringbone swatch. And now I have even a smaller scale one that I did here. And basically all I did was just to get that was, again, to just take the larger scale version that I had here. I just took that, took the black arrow, held shift on my keyboard, and I scaled it down. And I matched it up kind of close to the fabrication that I had here because it was handy to have these two fabrics next to me to reference for scale. So I just shrunk it down, holding shift because I wanted to keep my proportions the same, until I got a look that became very similar to my original swatch. And then when I had a smaller scale version of that created, I would have to do the same exact thing as the big scale. I have to put it through Object Pattern Make Window one more time, because now I have a smaller scale version that needs to be put into repeat. So anytime you scale these patterns, you have to put them back into Object Pattern Make and do one more repeat, now with a smaller scale version. So you'll see again, as you saw in the larger scale, that there's a big chunk of space in the middle, so we need to fix that. And you also see that the sections on the left and right hand side are not kissing. They're not touching, and that's what we want. We need them to touch. So those are the two major things that you're always going to have to fix every time you put these zigzag patterns into Pattern Make Window. So I'm just going to, again, use the pattern tile tool. I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to first correct this big white space that's happening on the top and bottom down here by pulling at the top and dragging it down. And at the same time I'm pulling at the top, you'll notice that the bottom is getting closer as well, and that's what I want. So that's why I said you only have to pull at one side in order to correct both the top and bottom. Same thing with the left and right. So I start pulling down until I feel like all the space in between looks the same. And then this is where I zoom in a lot more when it comes to the left and right side to correct that. I zoom in so that I can get up close and actually pull it from the side so that I can make sure that my zigzag is connecting at the left and right hand side. So once it looks like the spacing is good, the left and right hand side connections is good, then I hit done. Oh, zoomed in too far. And then, same as I did with the larger scale, I could just copy that same exact box so I don't have to do a brand new rectangle. Except now I'm going to click on my new swatch that is the smaller scale version. And now you'll see that that same exact herringbone is now offered in two different sizes. So I have my large scale up here, and then I have the same exact herringbone, but now on a smaller scale. So again, I can create that as an overlay over top of an existing color. So this, for instance, I replicated this colorway by using a darker gray kind of base with my herringbone as a darker gray color to kind of mimic this colorway here. But it's still two layers, one rectangle of color and one rectangle of a textured overlay, which is our herringbone. Now, if at any time you needed to recolor these textured overlays, because you're trying to replicate a certain specific color like this. So say if you had a textured overlay that you've already created that was in black, you can go up to the top tool. Once you click on it with the black arrow, you can go up to the top toolbar and you'll see the recolor artwork tool. We use this same tool during our plaid lesson. It just looks like a wheel. So click on that. Once you have it, this textured overlay, you can just hit the recolor button, double click on the little color chip, and recolor any color that you want. And you'll see that you have a lot of different colors of this herringbone available to you that you can then put over top of any existing pattern, as you see here. I mean, any existing color swatch behind it to give you a different look. So that